This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 82nd edition of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. Today as my special guest, I have Jason Puckett. Jason has been affiliated at Seattle's KJR AM 950 All Sports Radio as a radio host and reporter now for many years. Jason is the current host of the Puck Show from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Monday through Friday. Mr. Puckett is also known as Puck, has had quite a presence in the Seattle sports media community. Rent native, Washington State University grad. He worked in Oregon at one time. My Sports and Stuff show has been around now for nearly 3 years, having a lot of fun. I'm able to do this with my law practice. And most of my interviews are now on YouTube. Some are on Mixcloud. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter at PLS Law Offices. And a bunch of my interviews are also on my law firm website. Well, Jason, I really appreciate you coming on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio for the 82nd edition.
Well, thanks, Paul. I mean, it's been kind of not quite full circle, but I know when I first met you and kind of got in touch with you was obviously not under the best circumstances because of what was happening in the city with the Sonics and the move. And I remember you were such a prominent guest on our station, on our shows during the whole trial with the Sonics and them trying to break their lease with the city of Seattle, which it just seems amazing. It seems, as the playoffs are going on right now. I mean, we've been 15 years.
Excuse me,
13 years, right? 2008, yeah.
I can't believe it. Well, I would take issue that I was a prominent guest on your station. But
yeah.
I will say this. Prominent goes too far. I will say this, though, Jason. And Brian Robinson and I talked about this once, the Save Our Sonics co-founder, is that, there were a lot of great people and friendships that I did make through that whole Save Our Sonics battle. Unfortunately, the result was terrible. We lost our team, and all sorts of great people I met, including you, Jason. So there were a couple of blessings through my whole experience in that deal.
Okay, now don't take this the wrong way, all right? If I never met you, but it meant the Sonics were still here, I think I'd sign up for that, Paul.
Well, I
you know what I mean?
I get it.
I mean, I get it.
I was sugarcoating it a bit, maybe, but I just wanted to mention that there were some good people that I met through that whole movement. So I wanted to throw that in there. But it's just
it's amazing. That's 2008, and I never thought you would ask me then. How long do you think that they'll be back? I would have said within 5 years. Within 5 years, we'll have a team back, and now we're going to complete which would be the 12th year. Right, if my math was off. Yeah, it's amazingly sad would be the way I would describe it.
No doubt about it. It really is unfortunate. So, Jason, I want to start with this question, and I've been asking this question to various guests over the last couple of months. I'm getting all sorts of fun answers, and let me give you a couple of the guest answers, and I'll ask you the question, Jason. Dave Grosby answered Floyd Merriweather. Furness said Russell Wilson. Dave Sims answered Sandy Koufax. Softy answered Tiger Woods. Steve Kelly answered Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Percy Allen said Mike Tyson. Steve Rabel answered Bill Russell. Jason, who is a living sports figure who you've never interviewed and you would love to interview or have an extended conversation with?
That's a great question.
I gave you a lot of clues.
A living sports figure who I've never interviewed before that I would love to interview. Well, I can only give you one, right? Well, you got to, I'd love to say Tiger, but then you couldn't get anything out of Tiger probably, which would be hard. I'd probably have to say Michael Jordan. I think Michael Jordan would be it for me. I mean, that's the era I grew up in as a massive basketball fan, and he was and still remains the greatest basketball player of all time. But I'd like to sit down, Paul, and just talk to him just about everything, how much he changed sports. It's not only was he the best basketball player of all time. You could make the argument whether or not he's the best athlete. Now we're going to get a debate of other sports, but he was certainly the biggest and remains the biggest sports icon the sporting world has ever seen. I'd like to ask him just, how much does he think about that, reflect on his impact on the sporting world, and the impact that he's had just, beyond the basketball court. So I guess that would be my answer.
You know what's interesting, Jason? I would have thought I would have gotten Michael Jordan earlier with that question I keep asking. So I think that's a very good answer. And another person, I mentioned this to Furness, who I think would be a fascinating interview. He's not an athlete, would be David Falk, Jordan's, I think, agent. I mean, sure. Falk would be a fascinating guy to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was, rode with him, shotgun for all those years. I think that his explosion in the sport, obviously the explosion of Nike at the same time, the explosion of mass marketing, commercials, commercialization of sports, the marketing of a sports athlete, that all just kind of came together right at this, it was a perfect storm, and he was the perfect athlete for it because he was not only great, he's good looking, he's marketable, and, it took all of that. And, if there's no Michael Jordan, I mean, who's to say there's no Tiger Woods? I mean, does Tiger Woods have that same type of impact? So, yeah, it's, the the billions of dollars that he has, raised and amassed, it's just eye opening. And, he certainly was thrust back into the, spotlight because of the documentary that they did, on the Chicago Bulls. But yeah, I'd like to just be able to, and I'd like to do it in a relaxed environment, like he was in that documentary, have a couple adult beverages and some cigars and kind of get him
right.
to be relaxed because, you'd like to have, just an open and, honest, just chat with him, and get him to speak, honestly about anything you'd ask him.
Another worthy sports figure to add to my little fun list. So, Puck, tell us about yourself a little bit. And, we've been following you for so many years, and so many people have in Seattle media circles. How did you get the broadcasting bug?
Yeah, pretty early on. Yeah, I mean, I was, I've always been a big sports fan, since I can remember. I probably equate that a lot to my dad, growing up, who was a huge football fan, mainly, Huskies and Seahawks. And when I was a kid growing up, my weekends were spent going to either, I was going to a Husky game on Saturday that we had season tickets to. And then on Sunday, we would drive back down, to Seattle or up to Seattle, and I'd go to a Seahawks game. So, in the fall, I was Saturday afternoons at Husky Stadium, Sunday afternoons I was at the Kingdome, and it just, that was my life for, since I was, 7 years old, and we did that all, every single, weekend. So, I just had I had that bug early on and just liked all sports, and it just kept growing. And I was in, finally when I think I was in about, 7th or 8th grade, I think it was 8th grade, we had and I loved it all. I mean, I would, the way that I learned to read and become more proficient in reading was that I would read, the sports section of the newspaper. I got Sports Illustrated. And so, in the morning I would come down before school and I'd read the sports section in the Seattle PI. And then when I got home from school, I would read the sports section of the Seattle Times. Because, I mean, if I'm old enough, if people, listening to this, they have no clue that we used to have 2 newspapers in town. And one paper was delivered in the morning, and then we had an afternoon paper. That, it's mind-boggling to think about that now in the age of the internet and social media and all that. And so I would come home and I would devour that newspaper with anything that changed, during the time I was away from school. And in 8th grade, we were at my junior high. We were given an assignment to kind of like a job shadowing program. It was kind of like, hey, find something that interests you that you think you would like to do when you get older. And as I mentioned, I devoured everything. It was the baseball games on the radio with the Mariners, the Sonics, Seahawks, the Huskies, the Cougars, all of it. And so my brother and sister went to Washington State, so I had an allegiance to them as well. And I loved, and still do, love local news. And I loved all of the local news sportscasters when I was growing up. And in my era, it was just the best. It was Bruce King at Channel 4. It was Tony Ventrilla at Channel 5, and then it was the great Wayne Cody at Channel 7. And I just love those guys to death. But getting back to what happened in 8th grade, we were given a chance to do a job shadow. I loved Bruce King. He was kind of my idol, one of my idols growing up. And so I got a job shadow, and I spent a day shadowing Bruce King around Como News, and just kind of saw how all the news, department went. And, when I did that, I came home. I just knew at that point, so I'm 8th grade. How old am I? 13, 14. I knew at that point that I wanted to do something to talk about sports, whatever it was. Write about it, talk about it, be on TV. There's no sports talk radio at that point, but I had the bug early on, and it just continued. I got into high school, and I continued to play sports. I played football and basketball and baseball, and I wrote for the student newspaper. I ended up becoming the sports editor of the newspaper, and when I went to Washington State, I was going to be I went into broadcaster. I went into journalism. I was going to be a reporter. I wanted to go to that route, and then just things evolved, and I got more into the broadcast journalism side of things at Washington State at the Murrow School of Communication, which my degree included radio and TV. So that's kind of the long-winded answer. I mean, I could go on longer, but yeah, I mean, I got the bug real early on. I knew that I knew early on I wasn't going to play sports because I had stopped growing, so I knew I'd have to talk about it.
Our upbringings, Jason, in Seattle are similar in a lot of ways. And I grew up with my late dad going to a lot of sports events. And I was never the greatest athlete by any means, but I can relate to your story there. And, there was a famous American political operator who died a few years ago named Robert Strauss. And Strauss was once asked, what's your favorite part of politics? His answer is, I love the whole damn deal. Is that kind of how you feel about sports? Yeah,
it's just fun, Paul. It's just fun, and it's new, and it's never the same. I think that, life, well, not life. I mean, things can be so, things can be so just, rudimentary, and you can kind of fall into the trap of everything kind of being the same all the time. The beauty of sports is you just never know. I mean, it's, you hear baseball, reporters talk about it all the time. You go to the ballpark, you're going to see something you've never seen before. I mean, I think that's the same with any sporting event. You turn on a golf event, you're going to see something you've probably never seen before. You turn on a basketball game, it's brand new. You don't know what's going to happen. There's just a level of excitement to it. I love, early on the lessons that sport taught me that I think is required, that everyone play sports and be a part of team early when they're in their youth and they're kids. I think it would personally go a long way to improve relations in our country with people that don't look the same, don't speak the same, have different views on things, because what sports do, especially when you're young, is it just shows that we're all kind of, for that moment, in it together, and we're much more alike than we are different. So there are so many things I love about it, but I think that's the perfect answer.
I agree. I agree.
It's everything that it brings.
The whole darn deal, the whole damn deal, like Strauss said in politics. This is Paul Schnarman, host of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with longtime KJR Seattle sports radio host Jason Puckett. All right, Puckett, I want you to challenge me on this. Feel free to challenge me on this. So I am not a big fan of the 60-game MLB truncated season. I guess I'm glad it's happening. And I don't want any of the Mariners to get sick or to get hurt, of course, but I'm just not that into it. I just, even if the Mariners were getting the playoffs this year, I just don't think it's legitimate. It's about the mathematical equivalent of crowning a 6-game Super Bowl winner, literally. Am I off base?
No, I mean, because I agree with you. I mean, it's whoever wins it this year. And I've said this many times on the show, the only city in America that will not consider it an asterisk next to the name of the team that won the World Series will be that city that won. Every other city and every other fan base, despite what they may say now, will say, well, yeah, you won, but it's, not really a real season. But if you are that city that wins it, you're going to be like, whatever, these were the rules. This is what was, put in front of us, and we won playing the same style, playing under the same rules. So let's just say the Mariners got in and they won, right? Honestly, even how I feel now, I would say, yeah, we're World Series champions. We won under the rules that were being played. But of course, it has to have an asterisk, and I would even acknowledge it. And it just does because, that's the one thing that's the beauty of baseball. That is unlike maybe the other sports. It is just a marathon, and it's a grind. It's 162 games. That's why it generally weeds out those, those teams, and the cream usually rises to the top. So, look at last year. Had we played a truncated season last year, the Washington Nationals don't even get into the postseason because of where they were at after 60 games. So, but I'm trying to just enjoy it for what it is. I mean, I guess I know what it is, Paul. I mean, I know that it's a shortened season. I know that it's not a regular baseball year, but I'm just trying to enjoy that we have baseball and we can watch it. And it's, to me, it's a better alternative to play 60 than to not play any.
I hear your point. So like I said, mathematically, it's about the equivalent of a 6-game NFL season. So I just see so many asterisks around this year, but it is fun to watch some of these young Mariners. Chase, let me hit a few more topics. So we had 2 losses in Washington State, 2 gentlemen who had real influences in the sports team in the state of Washington, Slade Gordon and Bob Robertson, a longtime WSU football announcer. One thing I want to share about Slade is the fact that he stood up for Save Our Sonics. And granted, as we talked about earlier, we weren't able to save the team, but the fact that Slade put his neck out on that, I think it's part of his legacy. Like this chat for a minute on giving him kind of the Puckett take on the legacies of Slade Gordon and Bob Robertson.
Well, I mean, first start with Slade, with Mr. Gordon. I mean, the era that we live in right now is so polarizing with politics. Just to quickly dance on this subject for a second. There was a time in an era in which, we can have different beliefs and have different party lines, but we can still work together and find common ground. We may not agree on everything, and that's okay. We shouldn't agree on everything. Life and society would be pretty boring if we agreed on everything. And we need people to dissent, and we need people to challenge others. I'm old enough to remember him. I had a very good friend in college that worked on his campaign when we got out of college. So I have a pretty good, feeling and a good background about him. He reached across the aisle. That's kind of the phrase that, you kind of use. And he just stood up for what was right, regardless of where his party or any party felt they should have been. He always did what he felt was right. And if you're a sports fan, you owe a massive debt of gratitude to Slade Gordon. The reason we get to go to T-Mobile Park and enjoy, one of the world's best stadiums is because of Slade Gordon, and that goes back to what he did with the Pilots. When Bud Selig moved them, bought them, and then they moved the franchise to Milwaukee. His lawsuit forced Major League Baseball to give us another team. Had he not done that, had he not forced those senators to come and sit in court and then realize, yeah, we're screwed. We can't do this. We probably don't have a baseball team anymore, or we don't have a baseball team right now. And as much as we complain about the Mariners, and rightfully so, they just have not been good for their tenure, it's more, I'm glad that we get to complain about them. I'd prefer that rather than not having a baseball team. And then obviously when Smolin tried to move the team, and it's well documented what Slade did, him stepping in, finding local ownership. And I think, and this is what I talk about, reaching across the aisle, to force Major League Baseball to get out of what was really, honestly, a very insensitive and racist standpoint, Paul. I mean, to be honest with you, they were leery of having Japanese ownership. And, he had to convince them and said, listen, you don't want to have this become public where you're denying someone ownership of a baseball team because they don't look like you. And that was an important step, I think, for Slade Gordon.
Hey, Jason, real quickly, you probably haven't had this question before. Would you support incorporating Slade Gordon's name in the T-Mobile Park Stadium name?
Yeah, I am all for honoring him down there in some form or fashion. Yeah, I am. I mean, because, without him, we just don't have it. We just don't have Safeco Field, now T-Mobile Park, but we just don't have it. So, I just wish that, he was leading a good fight with the Sonics too. That just probably was, too much momentum was going the other way. But he is, there's so much other stuff that Slade Gordon did, but just sports-wise, he's a pillar of the sports community. And Bob Robertson, that one's a real touch. That's an emotional one for me. I'm such a huge fan of his. I looked up to him. He was one of the best broadcasters I've ever listened to. He was as prepared as anyone I've ever listened to, detail-oriented, as kind as a person that you will ever meet, never an ounce of an ego with him. His work ethic was second to none. I think all you need to know about Bob Robertson was, during his heyday when you are a football and basketball announcer for a college, that's a big deal, especially for a Division I team. You don't need to do anything else. He would, I would see him at the Tacoma Dome calling 3A and 4A basketball games while he still was the voice of the Cougars. I mean, he did this up until about, 8-9 years ago. And he would be in Yakima calling the 1A and 2B tournaments because high schools who didn't have broadcasters but were in the tournament, they need someone to call the games, and he would volunteer to do it. And I just thought that takes someone who just does not see himself as this larger than life figure. And he would show up to this Tacoma Dome when I would see him. He'd always be pleasant to talk to. And he would be his own engineer. He would be his own stat guy. He would be his own color analyst. He never had anyone to work with. And it was all seamless. And it was beautiful. He didn't know these kids at all. And you couldn't tell for a second that this is the first time he laid eyes on these kids. He painted a picture. It was beautiful. It was in depth. It was in color. It was great. We have been so honored in this area, in this market, to have some of the greatest broadcasters ever. And I'll challenge anyone with Dave Niehaus, with Bob Robertson, with Pete Gross, with Kevin Calabro, Bob Blackburn, and Bob Rondo. I will challenge that group to any group in any other city. I think it's second to none.
All real talents. Well, Bob Robertson just seemed like a terrific guy. James, let me get a couple more questions, and we're getting kind of close. I'd love to have you back one day. We can examine some more subjects. Jason, you worked in Portland, and Portland is one of the largest U.S. cities to only have one of the four major pro teams. Do you like the idea of baseball expanding to 32 franchises and maybe adding Portland and Montreal?
I do. I mean, I lived there and worked there for many, many years. It's a great sports town. It's big enough now and has been big enough for a while to get another professional franchise. They support. They're rabid about the Blazers, rabid about the Timbers down there. I think baseball would be a home run down there. It's a big baseball community. Not only Portland or that Oregon area and what Oregon State's done, what Oregon's done, but that Vancouver area, Vancouver, Washington, that Clark County, huge baseball communities down there. It would be, sorry the pun, it would be a home run. It just would be. The problem is that our team's going to try and I don't know how much legal stance they would have, but they would be someone that's against it because that reaches their footprint. But yeah, I think it'd be great. It'd be nice to have a team down there. So we would have finally for once a real natural rival because honestly, Mariner fans, we just don't have a rival. And it's not the Padres. We need somebody better. And I think Portland would bring that.
I think it's a fascinating idea. And by the way, this is many years down the road probably, but I could see the Mariners organization demanding some big territorial fee or something. But that'd be kind of a fascinating negotiation. Jason,
yep.
The name Larry Scott comes up, the Pac-12 commissioner. It seems like whenever his name comes up, people get fired up. He just seems like a guy that people love to hate. Why do you feel there's so much tension among fans when the name Larry Scott comes up?
I think he's allowed a great conference to slip through his fingers, and everything that he promised, he just has not delivered. And I think he came from a world of political correctness, and the bottom line is this. I know we tout ourselves in this conference as a conference of champions, which is great. I mean, we win a bunch of stuff, Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, and all that. The thing that stirs the drink in college athletics is football. And his lack of attention to detail, his lack of making sure football was a priority in this conference, and just tried to think like football was just like gymnastics and softball and basketball and women's basketball and baseball. Well, it's not. It's just he made a huge error on the network. He should have partnered up with ESPN or Fox to help out with the cost and help out with the production. The fiasco with the network getting it distributed, not to be on DirecTV, and all the hoops they had to run through with that was just a failure on his part. And I think he lacks just transparency and leadership. And, the move from Walnut to San Francisco, I mean, the cost to have that headquarters in San Francisco is more money than all of the other conferences combined. Now, I know the cost of things out here is more expensive than it is in the South and the Midwest and the East and all that. But, I mean, it dwarfs it. And he is financially irresponsible. And he's not transparent and has a poor track record dealing with coaches. And he's not a football guy. And he's not passionate about it.
Is he kind of stuffy, too? Is that another problem Larry has in perception?
I think he wants to leave. Yeah, I think he wants, he came from the tennis world, Paul, and he wants to leave this, this high-end, ritzy lifestyle living on the West Coast. And it's just not, that's not what you need. They need a football person in charge of this conference. That doesn't mean they ignore the other sports, but they recognize that football is the thing here. They hired Merton Hanks, who has been a long time in college athletics and the pros, administrative level. I'm hoping that's going to be a great hire for them and would help them out. But I don't think that the tenure is long for him. I mean, I think I would give it less than 6 months. I think he'll be replaced for sure.
We're getting very close to concluding this interview, Jason. But one thing I noticed about Larry Scott, it just seems like everyone around the conference seems to unite around not really caring for him, at least among the fan base. It's kind of sad in a way, but it's kind of weird how people can unite because they're so pissed at somebody, But anyhow, I appreciate your feedback. Well, Jason, I really appreciate you doing this, and I'd love to have you back when they believe me. I had all these other subjects written down as possible conversation points. I think we got into some good stuff, and I appreciate you doing that appearance on Sports and Stuff on Radio Rabbit Radio.
My pleasure, Paul. Anytime. Let me know. I'll come back anytime and join the show, and I always appreciate you reaching out. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.